Hi, Critic of Creation here, and this is the second video in my Questioning Islam series. This video is once again focusing upon apostasy, and the reason for that is a combination of just how damaging I believe it to be, and also the way that it seeks to influence individuals under Islam. Now, before we start, I want to make it clear that I understand not all those who practice Islam believe that non-believers should be punished. However, there are those who do, and in several countries this is the case. In this video, I examine what can only be described as justification of apostasy laws by Sheikh Asim al-Hakan.
Is the punishment for apostasy death in Islam? I heard someone say that one hadith is not enough evidence for this. The consensus of all scholars that if a person changes his religion from Islam to any other religion, the punishment should be execution, death.
Wow, so we're right into it then. Firstly, I would like to see this consensus because I watched several videos after this one with leading Islamic scholars who do not support apostasy or its punishment of death. Several of them stating that there could be errors with the hadith, which, if you are not aware, is an account or narration of events.
However, it is not for Tom, Dick or Harry to carry out this punishment. This cannot be done by any person without following the procedure.
Right. So your average Muslim cannot simply kill someone for apostasy. There has to be instead a set of procedures that are followed. I'm not going to lie, having a set of procedures for killing someone who doesn't believe the same as you doesn't make it any better or more acceptable.
Meaning, if someone says that he doesn't believe in the Prophet ﷺ, he's a Muslim. He says, I don't believe in the Prophet anymore, ﷺ. This is an act of apostasy. Can we go and chop his head off? The answer is no. First of all, you have to make sure that the conditions are fulfilled and that there are no obstacles preventing the description of apostasy to fit him.
So the objection of beheading him isn't that it is an immoral act, or that he hasn't done anything to deserve it and should be free to choose what he does or doesn't believe in. Your objection is purely that the criteria are correctly fulfilled.
How is this to be done? There has to be a panel of judges, Muslim judges or scholars, who would sit with this individual, interrogate him, advise him, remind him of Allah, trying to bring him back to his senses.
There is so much wrong with this statement. Firstly, I have to concede that anywhere with apostasy laws in place, it is only natural that you will be judged by people who believe in Islam. I'm not saying that is right, but if it is legal to leave the faith, then by definition the only people who remain are going to be believers. I don't like the word interrogate, as it rightly or wrongly implies torture, which I'm fundamentally against. So you are either questioning him, presumably about his reasons for attempting to leave the faith, or you are torturing him, by which point anything he says is now pointless because if you apply enough torture, people will always break. I'm not sure how he will be advised at this point either, other than explaining he has to come back to Islam or he will die. And finally, bringing him back to his senses is not something I would really apply in this scenario. You're giving him two options: believe in Islam or die. By this, you are implying that no one would logically leave a religion if they had any sense, which speaks more about the insecurities of a religion than anything else.
If he does not go back to his senses, in this case, they give their verdict to the Muslim ruler, the Muslim imam of the country. And when we say imam, he's not a person who leads prayer in a masjid in, for example, in Birmingham or in somewhere in Europe, who has a congregation of 1,000 or 10,000 or even 100,000. He's not the imam. He is a prayer person leading.
I wonder how much this is to do with the fact that these locations you have just mentioned would not legally allow you to punish someone for apostasy because of their freedom laws. If England suddenly passed a law that did, would you consider the leading imam in England suddenly sufficient to authorise this?
Prayer. The imam is the Muslim ruler who has the army, the civil defense, the police force, who runs the country. This is the imam who can only execute such a verdict, who can only implement the death penalty over an apostate.
That sounds an awful lot like a dictator to me, and if someone has this power, can anyone challenge him or question his leadership? Look, I don't like to generalise, but I'm going to in this case. Dictators haven't got a great history when it comes to looking after their subjects, and it strikes me that apostasy would be a particularly easy way to dispose of those who would question the regime or oppose it. Either way, having a chief imam who is in charge of the country pass the death penalty down doesn't make it any less horrendous.
But not any person. Therefore, if the judges give the verdict to the ruler and the ruler looks into it, and then he carries out this punishment. The Prophet said, whoever changes his religion, execute him. This is not for individuals. So if I'm living in Holland and my next door neighbor is a Muslim or was a Muslim and then says, listen, I don't believe in the Quran, I don't believe in Allah, I don't believe in anything, or changes his religion and becomes a Christian and he wears the cross, I say, I'm a hot-blooded Muslim, I'm going to chop his head off and then I'm going to say that he did this and that. If I do this, I'll go to hell. Because you cannot give takfir without the fulfillment of the conditions and being sure that the obstacles are not there. This is not for individuals to be done.
Okay, so again, we don't have anything so much as a morality issue here. You don't say that cutting off non-believers' heads is wrong because they should have the freedom to choose, but it is simply because the individual hasn't followed the correct procedure.
This is only to be carried out by the Muslim ruler. And we know what happened when Van Gogh, the director, the Dutch director, was executed on the streets. How many problems resulted from that. Always look at the consequences.
Here he is talking about Theo van Gogh, who was murdered in 2004, and the reason it links back to this video is he had produced a film about violence towards women in Islam. I do note that at no point does he condemn the killing, to say that shooting a film director several times, trying to decapitate him, and then stabbing a knife through his chest with so much force it lodges in his spinal column is utterly wrong, but instead that it caused a lot of trouble. Always looking at the consequences implies, to me at least, that if there had been no consequences for this act, it would have been fine. Don't get me wrong, if there were no consequences for a lot of actions, a lot of people probably would do immoral things, but at no point would these suddenly become fine by today's social standards.
Don't be impulsive. Do things without knowledge, like these keyboard knights that we see on Twitter, on Facebook, on the internet, calling for jihad and calling for killing people and making takfir to all people around you except them. Don't be like them. This is not the way of the Salaf. This is not the way of the Prophet ﷺ. Whoever says to a person, ya kafir, one of them has to take it. So either he is a real kafir, or if not, it's going to bounce back at you. One should be really careful when going into these things. So, yes, in Islam, the punishment for apostasy is death penalty only after a panel of judges interrogate, speak to that person, try to bring him back to his senses. If he still insists, then this is worse than grand treason, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best.
Right, so that's the end of the video, and it's perhaps one of the worst videos I've seen in its attempts to justify the killing of someone. At no point does he consider the rights or wrongs of the scenario, if it is appropriate for the modern era, or if it is possible to have a constructive, productive society where people who believe in different faiths or not get along. The fact that these attitudes exist is worrying, but more so is the fact that they are strictly enforced, meaning that in certain countries people will always be oppressed under religious doctrine because to question something or to challenge the norm is punishable by death. People are being killed for apostasy. It might not happen every day, and it might only be in certain countries, but that doesn't make it acceptable. What this boils down to, for me at least, is the idea that religion is insecure. If it cannot hold up to criticism or questions, it doesn't deserve respect. Shutting down an argument isn't winning an argument, it's merely pointing out that you have no way to respond to it. What is worrying is the effect this can have on certain individuals. As I've already stated, I don't believe that the vast majority of Muslims believe this to be the case, but some do, and are willing to act upon this ideology to the detriment of all. When leading speakers seem to condone actions like this, or at the very best condemn them only because of the consequences they cause Muslims, then we really have to question this regressive element of Islam and if it is hindering society. Anyway, that's enough from me. As always, give me a thumbs up if you liked my video, and if you have any questions or would like me to cover something in particular, please leave a comment below. Up until next time.